Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and welcome back to my YouTube channel Czechoslovak Gun Stories. My name is Kuba and in today's episode we are gonna have a look at the first Czechoslovak attempt on caseless ammo. Before we start with a deeper look at the first firearm using a caseless ammo in former Czechoslovakia, I thought it would be nice to have a look at the idea of caseless ammo itself. Because when you say caseless ammo, it sounds really like futuristic, right? It's like a space age technology, something that's very very advanced, very modern. But actually, it's not, right? Yeah, the cased ammo these days is perceived as, let's say, a nearly perfect type of cartridge for actually any gun, beginning with a pistol all the way to a machine gun and even an artillery and so on. But there is a question why the designers are still attracted by the idea of getting rid of the casing, which makes the caseless ammo so good. So let's find out. Well, to understand the reason why the designers are still interested in creating a caseless ammo, if, as I said, this is nearly perfect type of cartridge, we have to have a look into history for a while. Let's say that actually all types of firearms prior to the invention of cased ammo and its, let's say, spreading all across the globe, which was probably the beginning of 18th century and throughout the 18th century. All the weapons before that were using caseless ammo, right? All of those muzzle loaders, muskets, flintlocks, everything was using caseless ammo. What you did with all your muzzle loaders, flintlocks, muskets, you dumped the powder down the barrel, added some plug that compressed the powder, it could have been some paper or cloth or something, then you added the projectile, compressed it as well, then you needed some sort of ignition, like percussion cap or a little bit of ignition powder, you cocked the weapon and you were ready to shoot. Well, from the goofy description, you probably were able to ascertain as I'm not really into a muzzle loading shooting. I don't own any muzzle loader, never even fired one. But from the brief description, you probably can tell that it was not the ideal way of the function for military use, right? So you may be wondering uh, why the designers want to really invent something new if this proved to be nearly perfect. Why do you want to go back and use this ancient technology? Well, the truth is, they are not really trying to use any ancient technology. They are not trying to completely cut out the casing. What they're trying to do is to sort of melt down the advantages of both the cased ammo and the ammo that was here before. It may sound weird, but well, to understand it, let's have a look at the advantages of cased ammo and its predecessor. Let's start with the cased ammo. First things first, the cased ammo is very well sealed. That means that both the powder and the primer are protected by the casing, so you don't have to worry about the powder getting damp, which typically makes the gun jam or not work properly, right? So you can pretty much pour a bucket of water of this 9mm cartridge, which is my hand load, and then you can load it, shoot it just fine, no problem. Whereas back in the day, if your powder got damp, then you pretty much were screwed. Along with the cased cartridge being sealed goes also the reliability, and the reliability is also related to the easiness of the cased cartridge to be loaded and carried around. So as I said, you can carry it, you don't need to worry about it getting getting damp, or you also are able to carry these cartridges in a magazine. And once again, to that is related the rate of fire as well as the reliability. So the rate of fire, obviously, if you have a magazine with 100 rounds, you have a fully automatic weapon, you can shoot them all at once, no problem with that. Whereas with the previous cartridges, the muzzle loaders and the percussion revolvers, you had like 6 shots and that was it, and then you were expected to take like a minute or 2 or 3 to reload the weapon completely. Yeah, so not ideal. Also, the accuracy is better with the cased ammo because you have the casing that seals the chamber. Also, the powder charge is much more consistent. Also, the bullet itself typically has much tighter tolerances. So, yeah, typically your cased ammo will be always a little more accurate than your muzzleloader, even though I'm not trying to say that muzzleloaders are not accurate, right? We know what the Confederate snipers could do with Whitworth, but if you compare it to the modern sniper rifle using cased ammo, that's completely two different worlds, right? So we've discussed the advantages of cased ammo. Now you may be asking, what is it that the designers want to really grab from the previous era, from the black powder era, and introduce into the modern use? What is it? Because we probably named all the advantages, right? Well, almost all of them. There are still a couple of disadvantages of cased ammo. So first things first, if you ever got into reloading and you were short of brass, you didn't pick up enough brass on the range, and you had to buy these guys new. You probably know that it is the most expensive component of reloading, right? Primers, powder, projectiles can be pretty cheap, but the casing is almost never a cheap item in case of reloading. So if you cut out this guy, which, by the way, if you are in the middle of a firefight, shooting fully automatically, then you simply throw it away from your gun and never pick it up, which means that you are wasting money because this guy can be reloaded a couple of times. Again, it's not a one-use item like a powder or a primer. So that's one thing that the designers want to do. They want to make the ammo cheaper. If you approach the caseless ammo the right way, then you will not only make it cheaper, but you can also make it smaller and lighter. But probably the most important advantage of caseless ammo is the fact that you can make either the cartridge or also the weapon very simple. Have a look at your old muskets and flintlocks and all those ancient or antique firearms. They're pretty simple, right? You just need some simple mechanism by which you cock the gun, add some percussion cap, and make sure that the spark is transferred into the barrel, right? And that's it, nothing else. So that's a very interesting, a very attractive idea for the designers. The simplicity of cased ammo is a very attractive thing, and so is the simplicity of the firearm. Because if you don't need any opening on the firearm through which you extract the brass, you don't need any extractor, ejector. So mechanically, the gun is much simpler, much easier to make, much cheaper, and also it's much better sealed against anything that can come into the gun and jam it, like dust, sand, water, mud. Well, that's a very attractive idea, very interesting for the designers, and so they're still trying to create an efficient and well-designed caseless ammo. Now that we discussed briefly the history and some reasons behind the caseless ammo, let's have a look at probably the first attempt that was done in the former Czechoslovakia by one Jaroslav Holeček. In terms of the Czechoslovak firearms history, one of the most, let's say, advanced, most interesting designs that was turned into a very well-functioning prototype even was the firearm and the caseless cartridge that was designed by one Jaroslav Holeček. You may have heard his name already. Jaroslav Holeček was a very young firearms designer, and if you watched my previous episode on Kotsky brothers, which you can find here, you probably know that after the World War II, there was a series of trials in the former Czechoslovakia to replace all weapons of the Czechoslovak armed forces, beginning with pistol, ending with machine gun. And one of the most interesting trials were the trials to find a new submachine gun for the Czechoslovak army. The idea was to find a universal weapon that would be fit to be used by all the branches of the military, police, even paratroopers, tank crewmen, pilots, everybody. So it must have been compact, it must have been simple, and it must have been very effective. So there was a whole bunch of designers taking part in the trials, and one of them, Jaroslav Holeček, at the time a young soldier in the Czechoslovak army, came up with an idea of so-called telescopic bolt and the magazine in a pistol grip. His idea was, let's say, designed in the submachine gun called HP. The submachine gun HP was found to be very interesting for the Army Commission, and they actually asked all the other designers to come up with their own firearm based on this concept. Let's keep all the designs and just give you the most important information. The trials ended up with one design that was introduced by Jaroslav Holeček, the same guy who brought the idea into the trials, and the pattern that, or the prototype that he presented to the commission later became VZ-23, 4, 5 and 6 series of submachine gun in the Czechoslovak armed forces. So from what I just said, you probably realized that this guy was very innovative and he loved to really bring new ideas into the firearms development. And well, as if the idea of magazine in the pistol grip and the telescoping bolt wasn't, let's say, innovative enough, he decided to take the idea even further. And he designed what we now know as 9x30 caseless ammunition. We can have a look at the picture here. It was a self-contained cartridge, which was actually a bullet that was hollow, and inside the hollow part of the bullet was a powder, and it was all plugged with a primer. So you had the same as this, a self-contained cartridge, but without the casing itself. And when the cartridge was loaded into weapon, then you shot the projectile, the powder burned, and then the remainings of the primer were thrown from the barrel following the projectile. So you didn't need any opening on the gun to extract anything. That was the very ingenious idea, I would say, because you didn't need any special technology to create such cartridge. You just needed to create a hollow projectile, fill with powder, plug it, that was it. To speak about the cartridge itself, its mass was 130 grains, which is 8.42 grams. So this lead projectile has a mass of 128 grains. So this was almost the same weight as Mr. Holeček's cartridge. And that's just a projectile. If I compare the projectile with the finished cartridge, cased cartridge, then you can even feel the difference. And well, so imagine how how many more rounds could a soldier carry if this cartridge was introduced in the service of the Czechoslovak armed forces. So that's a definite advantage, but you may be asking, was the cartridge efficient? How accurate it was? And did it have the same performance as an ordinary 9mm, which was at that time probably the best pistol cartridge of all times for submachine guns? I have to say, yes, it was a little better than 9mm cartridge in any way. It was more accurate. That's probably because the cartridge itself was hollow, which helped to stabilize it. Also, its muzzle energy was slightly higher than the muzzle energy of the typical 9mm cartridge. The muzzle energy of Mr. Holeček's projectile was approximately 400 meters, which is like 13-12 feet per second. So yeah, we can pretty much say that it was equal or better than the 9mm Luger or 9mm Parabellum standard cartridge. Now, to give a little more details about the projectile was not made out of lead, but it was an ordinary steel cartridge, and around the cartridge there were two brass rings that were compressed on the projectile. These two brass rings helped to seal it inside the bore and also lead it correctly through the bore, because if you're using just the simple steel cartridge, then the lifespan of your barrel would be very, very low. So that was a way to bypass that. So that's for the cartridge, and now let's have a look at the firearm he designed for this cartridge. The development took place in the 1950s, so once again it was a very, very advanced idea. It was based on the same prototype as the VZ23, 4, 5 and 6 series, so it was a firearm with a magazine in a pistol grip, a firearm with rather long barrel compared to the total length of the firearm, but in this case the barrel was even longer than in case of the VZ23. That's because this gun had no bolt. It was working on the, let's say, blow forward sort of a principle, when the barrel was the reciprocating mass. When the weapon was cocked, the barrel was caught in the forward position, and if you pull the trigger, then you release the barrel, it started to go back. Along its way it stripped the cartridge from the magazine and traveled at the very end of the weapon. At the end of the trunnion there was just a simple fixed firing pin to against which the barrel with the cartridge inside slammed. That ignited the cartridge and it threw the barrel forward, when it was either caught by the sear if you were shooting like in semi-automatic mode, or in case of the fully automatic mode, if you held the trigger pull, then it was just repeating the same movement until you were out of ammo or until you released the trigger. So pretty simple solution, and that allowed the length of the barrel to be even longer than in case of the firearm that's using a bolt, which was wrap around partially the barrel, but still there was some mass that needed to be reciprocating in the firearm. So that really helped to increase the barrel length much more than in case of the telescoping bolt. There were actually two prototypes of the barrel. The first prototype was simple. There was a bore and the chamber, and well, this proved to be not reliable enough in terms of the function. Simply the energy was not enough for the barrel to cycle forward. So what Mr. Holeček did was that he machined a recess just a couple of centimeters between the bore and the chamber, and when the cartridge was ignited, then the expanding gases helped to push against this recess, and that actually made the function of the weapon much more reliable. Let's now talk about the dimensions of the firearm. So as I mentioned already, the biggest advantage of the caseless ammo firearms is that they are very lightweight, very simple, and very reliable. In case of Mr. Holeček's design, its mass was only 2.4 kilograms, which is 5.3 pounds, and it was very simple. It only contained 39 parts, to compared with some of the contemporaries. For example, the crudest design of Sten gun had 47 parts, and well, we thought that you can go any simpler than Sten. So the barrel length was 365 millimeters, which is 14.3 inch, and the total length of the firearm with folded stock was 472 millimeters, which is 18.6 inch, and with an unfolded stock, the total length was 730 millimeters, which is 28.7 inch. Now, if you compare the length with the folded stock, 472 millimeters, and the barrel, which has length of 365 millimeters, that's a great ratio of total length compared to a barrel length, right? It's like a similar idea as it was with the bullpup designs, right? To have a long barrel in a very compact package. Then the magazine was 32 rounds magazine, and the rate of fire they reached during the testing was 450 rounds per minute, but according to the designer, it could be modified up to 1,000 rounds per minute. So there's a lot of space in terms of rate of fire. As for the reliability, during testing, they shot 2,000 rounds with no problems on reliability. Now you may be asking yourself, what if I have a failure to fire, right? I have a dot in my chamber and I have no opening. Well, how do I remove the cartridge from the chamber? Well, if you have noticed a little lever inside the trigger guard, then if you pull the lever, there was a tiny little manually operated claw that helped you to extract the failed cartridge out of the chamber, and then there's no opening on the firearm, so you probably need to remove the magazine, and through the hollow pistol grip, that failed cartridge would fall out, and then you would just reinsert your magazine and you're ready to go again. You probably noticed on the cartridge that there is a little rim on the bottom, and that rim is just there because there is an opportunity for you to manually remove the failed cartridge out of the chamber via the lever in the trigger guard. So unfortunately, the design was probably way too advanced for the, let's say, half of 1950s. So Mr. Holeček design never made it to the serial production. However, this didn't prevent him from his further attempts to improve other firearms, and later on he invented, for example, a semi-automatic mortar or a rocket-propelled ammo, which was a couple of years later introduced in the USA by the company Girojet. I'm not sure if it was like the same ammo, similar ammo. I don't have any picture to share with you, but we can say for sure that this guy was very advanced in his ideas, and well, that's a pity that not more his ideas were actually introduced in the service of armies all across the world. So guys, that's it for today. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned something new. If you did, please hit the subscribe button. Also like the video, and if you want to share something with me, if you have some feedback for me or some questions, please use the comment section. It's there for you. So thank you, and until next time.